Good evening. You're watching Business Insight, and I'm Regina Manyara. This evening, we're going to be focusing at the potential that diaspora investments had and have had during this COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me this evening in studio is Engineer Isaac Mutemi, who is a civil engineer with 4 years' experience in public policy. Good evening, and thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Now, when you talk about COVID-19 disruptions as such and looking at the potential that diaspora investments had, from where you sit, what has been the impact?
So thank you for that question. And I would say the first thing that you'll realize if you take some time and look at the data, we have data now available from the central bank, looking at the diaspora remittances up to September 2020, the sum of the 12 months preceding that up to September 2020 compared with the same period in 2019. And you realize that it's actually gone up. The amounts that Kenyans in the diaspora are sending back home has gone up by about $200 million, which translates to 20 billion Kenya shillings. So it's actually been positive. We're seeing more people from the diaspora sending more money back home, perhaps with the reality that they know that their members back at home, the family members back at home are now facing severe risks because we know the economic scenario and the health scenario back at home. So yeah, so I'd say that has been one of the positive success stories with regards to how the diaspora community has responded to the COVID-19 crisis back at home.
Do you think this is going to last for the long haul?
So there are two issues here. So one is that we do not have reason to think it will not. And this is based on the evidence we have going back 10 years or more, when we have been observing the remittances and the amounts of remittances being sent by Kenyans in diaspora. So it's consistently been going up. And that's why I'm saying that there's no reason to doubt this. And the literature also, if you now take it to the academic route, it's always pointed out that remittances are sort of counter-cyclical to the normal investment routes, where you have the official development assistance or the foreign direct investments. And these are channels that sort of dry up when the developing country actually needs the money more. But the diaspora remittances actually increases whenever there's a crisis back at home. So that's the first part. But the second part is to say that we actually need more data, because, and this is part of the reason why I think later on we'll talk about the Diaspora Symposium and what the Kenya Diaspora Alliance is doing on this, but we actually just need better quality data on how the remittances are happening. And a quick demonstration of this is that the only channel we have right now, the only reliable channel we have right now on diaspora remittances is the central bank reports. Yet we know, both from anecdotal evidence from our members in the diaspora and also from the literature, we know that there are many other channels used by Kenyans and Africans in the diaspora to remit their monies back home. So, but there is just nowhere where this information has been captured officially. So yeah, so that's a two-part answer to the question of should we expect
what
this?
is going to be the long haul?
Yes.
We don't know if or not.
So the first part is to summarize. So the first part is we have no reason to expect that it will not continue in the long term. But secondly, to say that we actually need to invest a lot more in the data to understand the dynamics of the Kenyans and Africans in diaspora and understand the dynamics that drive their remittances back home.
Now, talking about, dynamics, we've seen that the diaspora investment is something huge, especially within the African continent. Then how do we explore innovative ways, to tap into skills and capital from the working class abroad, for national development? How do we pull that?
So I would say, and this dovetails pretty nicely now with the second point I just pointed out, where we need to invest more data, because in the context of the diaspora engagement with their communities, and probably to put this a little bit in the global context, this is not the first time the world is having a conversation about their diaspora. Japan had a conversation about their diaspora's involvement in development almost 100 years ago. India has had and continues to have very robust engagements with their diaspora. China is actually competing and almost overtaking the US's #1 economy in the world, based a lot on, and that strategy is based a lot on the engagements between Chinese diaspora and Chinese mainland. Because every year, for example, you'll have, of course, now we'll see with the effects of Trump policies and COVID-19, we'll see what happens. But China has been sending up to 100,000 students every year into American universities, American businesses, and it is based on that engagement between the feedback that they give back to the Chinese government and the Chinese society, that then they're able to create policies and create strategies that align Chinese business with global competitiveness. So now coming now to the Kenyan scenario and the African scenario, I'd say this. At the moment, when you talk about engagement with the diaspora, it's limited to a very narrow point of view, where we're only talking about remittances. And that is mainly because the way the agenda has grown has almost been a little bit by accident. It has not been a strategic investment in growing our diaspora community, in supporting our diaspora community, and expanding the possibilities for that. So because of that, then the only way we have been able to tag onto the diaspora engagement is through remittances, and remittances is basically the amounts the people in the diaspora are sending to support their families back home. So now yet, in spite of the fact that it has been sort of accidental, we sort of stumbled our way into this conversation, it is still the #1 foreign exchange earner for Kenya as we speak. And it is greater than official development assistance. It's almost double the foreign direct investment, in spite of the fact that it's been sort of an informal conversation. So the next step, in my personal view, and also the position of the Kenya Diaspora Alliance, the next step isn't to work with stakeholders. We have the Kenyan private sector, we have the government agencies, we have we have the foreign affairs departments, and we have all these other global players to now start having strategic conversations. How do we get the Kenyan diaspora to have a seat at the table? Because part of the role in helping to actually take advantage of those opportunities is getting people with the expertise. We have Kenyans in the United States and Kenyans all over the world who have participated in global trade.
Now, looking at the diaspora investment as it is, what are the low-hanging fruits in as far as investments back here at home are concerned? What areas? So
I would say this. We start, for example, we're organizing a conference in about a month's time, where we are just bringing our Kenyans in diaspora and coming together and saying what we have. And at the same time, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had a conversation with the Capital Markets Authority, where they also brought on board the first licensed investment fund that is focusing explicitly on diaspora remittances. And so these are some of the steps that we are taking to engage the stakeholders to talk about, for example, how do we help Kenyans in the diaspora get a measure of security about their investments when they send the money back home, not purely just for subsistence, but also for investments. What measures do we take to help send a signal to them that your investments are actually safe? Indeed, because that is a point of concern for many individuals who are working, overseas. There have been reports and claims that all the investments just, float in the air. There is no tangible investment. So this is something that's one of the issues that most, holds back tangible investments back at home. But now talking of the sectors, what areas do you think would be, low-hanging fruits, for the diaspora community to invest in back at home? I think the top two that come to my mind are the agriculture sector and the tech sector. So, and I'll give my reasons for both of them. So the agriculture sector obviously is because it is the one activity that we are heavily involved in as a society. So all around Kenya, wherever you go, you'll find Kenyans involved, whether informally or formally, in the agriculture sector. And if you look at the AGOA agreement, for example, between the United States and various African countries back in 2000, it gave license for Kenya to export up to about 6,000 items to the United States. But we were only able to export about 12 items out of the 6,000. And that's mainly because the expertise for doing the value addition to ensure that the way we invest, we move up the value chain for agricultural investments, that expertise has been largely lacking. And it's not because we do not have people who are working in those sectors. We do have people working in those sectors. So the only challenge then is, how do you connect the dots? How do you connect the people with the expertise all around the world to the scenarios, the opportunities we have back here at home. And if you'll allow me to quickly just make a comment with regards to what you just highlighted, the risks of investment back home. I'll say this. When we talk about the remittances conversation, we're having two conversations at once.
True.
We're having a micro conversation.
And a macro.
And we're also having a macro conversation. And this is courtesy of the fact that it has just grown so big and so huge, almost in the background, that now we cannot ignore it. When we have a policy conversation, it has to be part of the discussions that we're having on the table. So at the micro level, yes, for the individual investor, it is absolutely a deal breaker when they send back money back home and it is misappropriated. It's an absolute deal breaker, and we have to sympathize with that, because that is money. They're probably working 2 shifts to make that money. They are having to endure so many struggles to make sure that they make that money. So for them, it's an absolute deal breaker, and we have to do what we can to put in measures to protect them. But at the macro level, it's important to put this within its wider perspective. And the wider perspective, so I think I'd mentioned a little earlier that we have the remittances now is far outpacing the official development assistance, yes, which is standing at around the whole of sub-Saharan Africa is standing at around $52 billion. And supersedes also the foreign direct investment, which is comes from multinational companies and multilateral corporations investing in Africa, which is about $46 billion. And yet, when you talk about these two, when you talk about official development assistance and foreign direct investments, there are huge risks that accompany those. So we have, for example, the World Bank report that was released about a year ago, where they were saying that every time a major deal, support is signed between the World Bank and African governments, releasing billions of dollars in support to African governments, then there is a simultaneous increase in the amounts that are redirected to offshore accounts, private offshore accounts. And this is a trend that has been going on for 30, 40 years.
Yes.
So we have money that has been misappropriated through that channel over the last 30, 40 years, and this is huge amounts of money.
And how then does that reflect on us? We know we've been lumped together as Africa, but now let's put this into context within the Kenyan setup. How then does that reflect on us in as far as, diaspora involvement is concerned?
So I'll say this, because there isn't much that the average Kenyan can do to influence the conversation between the World Bank and the government, for example. There isn't much that we can do, a man on the street can do to say, okay, stop redirecting funds to offshore accounts. So that is beyond the purview of the average Kenyan. Yes. But what is in the control of the average Kenyan, and the reason why I just put the diaspora remittances conversation within its wider context is just to sort of temper the disappointment, because at the private level, there can be huge disappointments when money is being misappropriated. Yes. But when you put it within the larger context, then you get some perspective. Yeah. But that is not to say that we should then allow remittances to be misappropriated or support the misappropriation of remittances because, after all, this is happening in the World Bank. No, that is not to say that. It's actually to point out the opportunities that we have with regards to the remittances conversation, because the remittances conversation has only gotten the radar of many thinkers and public policy practitioners within the last decade. And yet, within that space, it has steadily proven itself to be stable, to be increasing, to be demanding the attention that it needs to be receiving. Mm-hmm. So I think in that context now, I think there is a lot more room for us to do a lot more preventive, to put in a lot more preventive measures with regards to how developing countries like Kenya, for example, absorb remittances, rather than compared to what's been happening with the official development assistance and the foreign direct investment. So
now that you've put it that way, we've seen the potential and the need to have preventive measures. Now the question then, how do African states especially tackle misinformation, on issued diaspora instruments and also the hurdles therein, and then the likely would be impact if this is corrected? So
to put this a little bit into context, I would say first, when we're having a conversation about remittances, within the larger global policy context, I think we're having a conversation focusing on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You're having a conversation about the Addis Ababa Action Agenda of 2015, and you're also having a conversation about the African Union Agenda 2063, and finally, there is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which was just signed last year, and a couple of months ago, they opened up their offices in Ghana. And the conversation really that is underpinning a lot of that engagement is how do we enable ordinary African citizens to engage with each other across Africa? Because I'll put this, allow me to just make this comment real quick. The percentage of intra-African trade, where African countries are trading with each other, is about 2%, compared with what you're seeing in Asia.
Overseas.
And in Asia, for example, intra-Asian trade is at about 63%, as about 47% in Europe. So that's a larger picture. We are several decades back with regards to how we are engaging as ordinary citizens amongst other Africans and with our governments in Africa. So that's the larger context. But at the same time, what's happening is Kenya is taking a very significant and leading role in helping to sort of broaden this awareness and drive this agenda. In a sense, you could call this the third generation of the Pan-African agenda. Yeah. So we had the first Pan-African agenda with Kwame Nkrumah, and the famous Pan-Africanist that we had almost 60, 70 years ago, and that was primarily driven by the political urgency of kicking out the colonialist. Then we had the second generation, which was coming in as a result of the various struggles that African countries were facing in transitioning from post-colonial entities. And so you have, whether it's Africans going into exile, you had Tanzania, for example, playing a major role in supporting Africans all over the continent to fight apartheid in South Africa and all that engagement. And now we have this conversation on diaspora remittances, which is primarily economic, where we are saying this is actually a real big deal. We're having this issue on the table that we cannot afford to ignore any longer. And how do we participate in this conversation? So I would say there is a lot of room I'd say we have not even scratched the surface with regards to the potential that to how much further we can take this engagement. And I'd say the way to do it, so I hope later on I can talk a little bit about the symposium that we're talking about. But what we have discovered as part of the engagement we've had with other Africans from Nigeria, from Ghana, is that there isn't much momentum. There isn't, at the formal level at least, we are not having enough of these conversations to talk to other thought leaders in Ghana, talk to other thought leaders in Nigeria, talk to other thought leaders around the world, around Africa, and say, how do Kenyans in diaspora support Nigerians in diaspora? How do we come together? How do we work together to expand this conversation for a mutual benefit? Yes.
So African states are not talking, and because they're not talking, they're missing out on the diaspora involvement, which is a hugely untapped potential.
Absolutely.
Going forward.
Yes.
Now, you've talked about the symposium, and it's going to be the first African Diaspora Symposium that is also going to be held in conjunction with the 7th annual Kenya Diaspora Homecoming Convention. Maybe you can elaborate what then the objectives and the expectations of this particular, occasion.
Yes, so we have the first African Diaspora Symposium. Previously, what we have been having as the Kenyan Diaspora Alliance, we have been having the annual homecoming, Diaspora Homecoming Conventions. And this is going to be the 7th one that we'll be hosting. So we have had 6 previous ones where we have had conversations with Kenyans in the diaspora. But now we have gradually been evolving our views and realizing that actually what we need to be doing is having a continent-wide conversation. That's why we are sort of rebranding and saying, let's expand this to have the African Diaspora Symposium. So, and there are 3 major goals that we are hoping to achieve through this. So number one, we are hoping to spark the dialogue We want to engage thought leaders now from all these leading African countries to come together and say, hey, can we work together to solve these problems? We have seen the problems with South Africa, for example, when African citizens are not talking to each other. The xenophobia attacks that we're having in South Africa, where you have Africans in South Africa having a very different starting point from Africans coming in from Zimbabwe, Africans coming in from Kenya, from Tanzania, from wherever. And they're resulting to now counterproductive measures. Just simply because there is no platform, there is no awareness to help, first of all, take in the perspective of the average South African and say, okay, what's your complaint? Where are you exactly? And how do we support that? And then take the Zimbabwean and say, okay, what's happening? And how do we support that? And how do we narrow the distance?
Harmonize and, going forward.
Yes.
And the second, please.
So the second is also now to generate a set of policies that can guide. So this will be high level. So now this is now more for the governments that are going to be consuming policy and the public policy practitioners to generate now a set of policy subscriptions and possibilities to say, so this is what we're looking at. So we get together all these thinkers and say, so what are the possibilities? What do you suggest should be, what you asked earlier, the low-hanging fruits for different countries. So we have, what is the low-hanging fruit for Kenya? What's the low-hanging fruit for Nigeria? What's the low-hanging fruit for Ghana? And etc. And then the third one is obviously, we're very cognizant that when you're talking about having a conversation on this scale, and especially when you have been united by the remittance conversation, you have to talk about business. You have to say, okay, fine, all this policy stuff is good, all this cultural stuff, helping Africans come together is good, but what is the actual business opportunity?
What's your take, and what influence then will these polls have on diaspora investments?
Well, that's a tricky one, because the two places, the two things you have to immediately take cognizance of. One is the perceived difficulties, whether perceived or real difficulties, that the previous administration of Donald Trump, we don't know whether he'll be continuing, has had with Africans, the very complicated relationship that has evolved there. So that's on one level, and that's especially because we are coming in from the ground level. We are organizing actually Africans in the diaspora. We're not just having a state conversation. It's not just Kenyan government talking to United States government. As Kenyan Diaspora Alliance, we are actually engaging with the ordinary Kenyan citizens in the United States. So when their liberties are threatened or when their safety is threatened, then we have to take that seriously and say, okay, fine, how do we engage that? So on that level, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. There's a lot of conversation that we need to have to figure out how do we help that. And there's a lot of opportunity, for example, alliance with the Black Lives Matter movement, because if you're black, you're black. It doesn't matter whether you were born in Kirinyaga or Murang'a or Kitui, or you're born in Dallas. So if you're black, you're black. And if black people are being affected somewhere, you will be affected. So that's a conversation on its own trajectory. Yeah. But then the other one is, which is also now significant, because we have, for example, the free trade agreement that Kenya is discussing with the United States. So, and we have a lot of other broader policy goals to be pursued. I think it's whoever wins, there's going to be Trump. At least one good thing that Donald Trump has done by putting the focus on the free trade agreement is that whoever wins will be faced with the need to take it a step higher and say, fine. So we have had this conversation start on how does the United States engage Africa. So how do you take that step a notch higher? To the next
level.
Yeah.
Now, in closing, tell us where this symposium is going to be taking place.
So it's going to be held from the 8th to the 10th of December, so that's just next month, and it's going to be at the Ole Sereni Hotel. So we invite everybody, just local, and it's going to be a hybrid. So we're going to have a physical part where we have delegates meeting at the Ole Sereni every day between from the 8th to the 10th. And we'll also have an online component. So we will have various Africans in the diaspora joining from all around the world and participating in the platforms. So we welcome everybody to join us, and we look forward to having a fantastic time. Yes.
Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Yes. We have been speaking to engineer Isaac Mutemi. They're saying that indeed this symposium is something you need to look forward for, and it's a high time that African states engaged in good conversations around the untapped potential that diaspora involvement is and what it can do to change the dynamics in as far as social and economic developments of African states are concerned. I'm Regina Manyara. You're watching Business Insight on KBC Channel 1.